Hey everybody, and welcome to the Battlefield Theologian YouTube channel. This is the start of a new class that I'll be doing through church history. Now, there's a lot of different aspects you can take with church history, and I'm just going to do a brief overview on highlighting certain elements. Now, the PowerPoint I have is from Nathan Busnitz's Forerunners of the Faith, but then I've also added in some of my own stuff. But if you wish to do this on your own, I highly suggest you check out Forerunners of the Faith. They've got a lot of great stuff there, great lectures, and it's a phenomenal curriculum. So as we're doing this, I'm going to be kind of taking us through some church history, and today we're going to be looking specifically at what led up to the Council of Nicaea. What was the Council of Nicaea about, and what should we think about it? You know, whenever you hear about the Council of Nicaea, if you've ever heard of it, there's a lot of controversies that arise from what was this. Dan Brown in his book, on the Da Vinci Code, made it seem as this was like the crucial council that like kind of ruined Christendom. That's when the canon was formed. That's when they rejected all this other stuff. But really what the point of the Council of Nicaea is much different than what most secular scholars have to offer. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to do a screen share, and I'm going to be showing you what this looks like here, and we're going to kind of go through what this looks like. So what we've got here is the Council of Nicaea, and where we're looking at too with the stage here, just so everyone is tracking, whenever you refer to the centuries, whenever you refer to what's happening with the first, second, third, fourth century, Council of Nicaea falls within the fourth century. So that's from 300 to 400 AD. And this was significant because a major turning point was that there was a lot of threats that faced from within the church in the form of false teaching, which is where polemics comes in. And then there's a lot of false teaching coming from without, which is where apologetics comes in. And so when we get to this point in the fourth century, the Christianity is about to stop, or the persecution of Christianity is about to stop. It started with Nero in 64 AD, and then it ends 250 years later with Emperor Constantine. So Emperor Constantine, he became the emperor through a bunch of different things happened during the time of the four emperors and everything else, and he converted to Christianity in 312 at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, in which he had a vision, if you will, or a sign. And in this vision and sign he had, it was essentially what he attests to being from God, was that he was going to bear the banner of Christ for Christendom and wage war under this banner and title. Now, at the Edict of Milan, this was important. This was in 313 AD. This is when persecution stopped against Christians, in which the Pax Romana was instituted, meaning that Christians could no longer be persecuted. It did not mean that Christianity was the legal religion. That doesn't come until Theodosius the Great later. But in 324, Constantine became the sole ruler through a series of events, and this is what set the stage for the Council of Nicaea. Now, what led to this was the rise of the heresy known as Arianism. It came from Arius, who is the founder of this, and what this basically asserts is that it attacks the deity of Christ, meaning that Jesus was not of the same substance. Arius put forth that Jesus was of a different substance. So if this is the case, if what Arius says is true, that Jesus is of a different substance, logically it implies that Jesus is different from God, meaning we no longer have a Trinity. And so this basically brought up a huge amount of controversy, so much so that the Council of Nicaea was called by Constantine to settle the peace. And this is the first ecumenical council that occurred since Acts chapter 15 in the Jerusalem Council, and this is the Council of Nicaea. So at the Council of Nicaea, this is where the terminology is used to dictate, is Jesus of the same substance, is Jesus of a different substance, or if Jesus is of a similar substance. So it's same, similar, or different. Arius came in saying Jesus is of a different substance than that of God. The Orthodox, which is what we believe, obviously, is that Jesus is of the same substance or the same essence. And this comes later on in church history because this problem does not go away very quickly. So Arius was condemned. The form of Arianism was condemned. And so leaving the First Council of Nicaea, this is where Arius changes his position slightly, going from Jesus is of a different substance to Jesus is of a similar substance. But again, similar does not mean the same, and the same is what we need to have. So Council of Nicaea met, the bishops voted. They voted that Jesus is of a same or the same substance. And so that is what happened with the Council of Nicaea. Now, moving past the Council of Nicaea, which I think is going to be important here as well, is we're going to be looking at a man known as Theodosius the Great. So Theodosius the Great reigned from 379 to 395, and he made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Yay, you may say, but actually, no, this was not very good. So what this means is that anyone born in the Roman Empire by birth is now considered a Christian, receives a Christian baptism. Whether they're converted or not, they are now deemed a Christian. And so now what happens when overnight you make Christianity the national religion, everyone now has to convert from whatever religion they were to Christianity or face painful and most sudden death and or exile. That's not very good. But what happens is all of the pagans and polytheists and all of their idol worship has to now convert that into Christianese. So they have to make that into Christianity. And the influence that happened from the pagan influence on Christianity, thanks to Theodosius the Great making Christianity the national religion, is where we see the veneration of icons, prayers to the saints, and the elevation of Mary, which should sound familiar to you. John Calvin writes against this in his treatise on relics, and I have a couple of quotes here about the problem that ensued after this happened that I think is very influential on us today in the Roman Catholic Church. And sadly, even within some evangelicals, they think that there's hero worship. So this is what Calvin says here. Hero worship is innate to human nature and is founded on some of our noblest feelings, gratitude, love, and admiration, but which, like all other feelings, when uncontrolled by principle and reason, may easily degenerate into the wildest exaggerations and lead to the most dangerous consequences. It was such by an exaggeration of these noble feelings that Roman paganism filled the Olympus with gods and demigods, elevating to this rank men who have often deserved the gratitude of their fellow creatures by some signal services rendered to the community, or their admiration by having performed some deeds which required a more than usual degree of mental and physical powers. The same cause obtained for the Christian martyrs the gratitude and admiration of their fellow Christians and finally converted them into a kind of demigod. So if you're not tracking what he's saying, is that what happened with the Olympus demigods and everything else that happened with Hercules and men like this doing crazy acts and feats, they applied that same logic now with Christian martyrs and saints, converting them into a form of demigod. So it's showing you the pagan influence on these saints that we have. This was more particularly the case when the church began to be corrupted by her compromises with paganism during the 4th and 5th centuries, which is where we've got Theodosius the Great, which having been baptized without being converted, this is what happens when you have Christian nationalism like this, where it's official religion. You're baptizing people even though they're not converted. They're rapidly now introduced into the church, and not only many of its rites and ceremonies, but even that of polytheism, with this difference that the divinities of Greece and Rome were replaced by Christian saints, many of whom received the offices of their pagan predecessors. So what Calvin's saying here is that polytheism, right, what and how they worshipped with their fake and false gods, they replaced those fake and false gods with the names of Christians. So this is just equivocating the titles or the proper names for Zeus for someone else, which is ridiculous and it's sad. Now, here's the thing is when this first happened within the church, when Theodosius the Great did this, the church noticed this and allowed it for a time being. But the sad thing was it crept in like gangrene and ate away at so many places and institutions within the church. And it says this: the church in the beginning tolerated these abuses as a temporary evil, but was afterwards unable to remove them. And they became so strong, particularly during the prevailing ignorance of the Middle Ages, that the church ended up legalizing through her decrees that at which she did nothing but wink at first. So I'm going to skip ahead here, but the interesting thing is that paganism borrows, not just try to borrow, but it did try to borrow from Christianity, its dogmas, its morals, and Christianity took from paganism its ornaments. So this came in the form of icons, this came in the form of the veneration of the saints, and obviously the elevation of Mary. But what Colossians 2:8 says, see to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of man, according to the elementary principles of the world, and not according to Christ. So what is John Calvin's summation of what happened when Theodosius the Great instituted the Christian national religion of Rome? Well, there was hero worship, which we see a lot of that today. There's elevating man to the rank similar to that of the Olympus gods and demigods. Christian martyrs now earned the recognition and admiration of converted them from polytheism into Christianity. And divinities of Greece and Rome were replaced by the Christian saints in the place of the pagan predecessors. And the church did tolerate these, but the Middle Ages, it kind of erupted even more. Now, like I said, whereas lifting of the persecution after the Council of Nicaea, with Theodosius the Great making Christianity, it seems like it's good. And a lot of people always think, oh, man, the church, when it's persecuted, that's not a good thing. Well, technically speaking, historically, when you look at the church, when it's been persecuted, the church grows and it flourishes because it outs those who aren't in the faith, and it keeps those in the faith because you're truly committed to it. So it's very interesting how when Christianity became the national religion without any conversion actually occurring, which you can't just manufacture that, naturally you're going to have man philosophy systems coming into that. So an example with this, Mary, which the worship and elevation of Mary was essentially is replaced with Isis, the mother goddess of Egypt. All right, this was the religion of Egypt that adopted into now what is the Christian Roman Catholic faith. The Lord's Supper, or what's known as transubstantiation, means that when you're taking the Lord's Supper, which is what a lot of different, sadly, denominations and religions believe within Christianity, is that when you're taking the Lord's Supper of the bread and the cup, that literally becomes the body and the blood of Jesus. So this is very similar to Mithraism, which was a Persian deity that was worshipped throughout Persia and the Roman Empire in the 1st to the 4th centuries, which faded when Christianity became the soldier's god. When that happened with Constantine, when he instituted his labarum, which was the mark of it's the chi and the rho, the first two letters in the Christ's name in the Greek, and this was practiced ritualistically as eating of one's God. So I hope that this was helpful and that you guys got a little bit of info here within the Nicaea 4th century moving into the 5th. I'm excited to do a little bit more of these videos in the future. And like I said, this is just a real quick overview just to give you guys some stuff to think about, to consider. Hope you guys enjoy this. If you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click subscribe. Hit the notification button. I've got a lot of other videos coming out in reliability of the New Testament, hermeneutics, example passages. And then also, if you don't mind too, just share this video or any of the other videos with anyone else, as we're trying to get this information out to as many people as possible. But thank you guys so much for joining me on the Battlefield YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, check out the Battlefield Theologian podcast. I've got some good stuff coming on that too. All right, guys, thanks so much. Have a good one.